It was supposed to be another late-night talk show, sharp, engaging, but ultimately forgettable. The kind where politicians trade sound bites for applause. But when U.S. Representative Jasmine Crockett stepped onto the stage, the air shifted. Her hands, usually steady from years of courtroom arguments and congressional debates, twitched slightly as the host mentioned the new pope, Robert Prevost. What followed wasn't a stump speech. It was a revelation, cloaked in memory, conviction, and something heavier, something no one in the studio could define. When she spoke, the room held its breath. Oh, and before we dive in, tell us in the comments. What's the one thing you admire most about Jasmine Crockett? The studio lights flickered on, hesitant, as if unsure of the weight they were about to illuminate. The audience clapped, their cheers warm but edged with curiosity. Something felt off, maybe the faint echo of footsteps backstage, or the way the polished floor gleamed too sharply under the lights. Maybe it was the guest herself. Jasmine Crockett walked out with her trademark poise, her tailored blazer crisp, her smile bright but guarded. She waved briefly, her eyes scanning the crowd, but there was a distance in her gaze. Her shoulders were squared, yet there was a slight hunch, not of defeat, but of burden. She didn't look nervous. She looked like someone carrying a truth too, heavy for the stage. The host, all polish and practiced charm, stood to greet her with a warm handshake and a quip that danced across the room. Jasmine, you're out here looking like you're ready to argue a case and run the House floor at the same time. The audience laughed. Crockett's lips curved upward, but the smile didn't touch her eyes. She took her seat, smoothing, her skirt, her fingers lingering on the armrest. On the table between them sat a glass of water, a notepad, and a small wooden cross. Not just any cross. It was weathered, the edges chipped, the carved figure of Christ tilted as if caught mid-fall. The host didn't seem to notice its weight. He sipped from a mug with his initials and kept the energy high. So much happening. Out there, Jasmine, the world's a mess, but you're still fighting the good fight in D.C. Speaking of global news, did you catch this? The new pope, Robert Prevost, is already shaking things up. He's got this, I don't know, still vibe, like he's floating above it all. The crowd chuckled, expecting a light pivot. But Crockett didn't laugh. Her eyes flicked to the cross, then back to the host. The camera caught it, a shadow crossing her face, a flicker of something unspoken. There's something about him, she said, her voice low but steady, the kind she used when cross-examining a witness. Something I can't quite put into words. The host blinked, thrown by the gravity in her tone. He leaned forward, trying to steer back to banter. You mean, like, spiritually? Or is he giving you vibes from someone back in Dallas? The crowd tittered. No, Crockett said, her gaze unwavering. It's what he doesn't bring to mind. The room stilled. The audience's murmurs faded. The host shifted in his seat, searching for a way to keep the show on track. Well, new popes always bring a fresh energy, right? Everyone's got their own style. Crockett closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, there was a glint, not tears, but the pressure before them. She glanced at the cross again, then reached out, her fingers brushing the chipped wood with a reverence that felt personal. She traced the cracks, her touch deliberate, then let her hand fall. I've stayed quiet long enough, she said. The words landed like a gavel in a courtroom. The audience froze. The host's smile faltered. No one knew what was coming, but they felt it. This wasn't a talking point. The cameras didn't cut away. The silence stretched, heavy, before the host spoke, his voice softer, cautious. Quiet about what, Jasmine? Crockett's eyes dropped. To the table, not to the cross, but to a small, faded envelope she pulled from her blazer pocket. It was creased, the edges worn as if it had been carried too long. She placed it gently between them. This came to me 2 years ago, she said. I didn't open it because I was told not to. The host leaned in, sensing the shift. Told by who? Crockett didn't answer immediately. She looked at the envelope, her expression a mix of resolve and regret, like someone revisiting an old case file. "It came after a meeting in Rome," she said. "A private one, not on any official itinerary. It was handed to me in silence. No words, no context. Just this." She slid the envelope closer to the host, who eyed it warily. There was no name on it, only a faint symbol, a cross inside a circle, etched in black ink. "I thought it was a mistake," Crockett said. "Or maybe a threat. But there was a note inside, one line." She looked at the audience, her voice steady but piercing. "Do not read until the dove has landed." The host's eyebrows shot up. "The dove?" Crockett nodded. "It didn't make sense then. I kept it, carried it with me, almost forgot it." She paused, her fingers hovering over the envelope. Then, Pope Francis passed. The studio lights glinted off the chipped cross, and for the first time, the production crew seemed unsure. No one reached for the next cue card. No one whispered in the host's earpiece. Crockett sat still, as if she'd said all she could, but then her voice returned, softer, more distant. "There's something else." The host turned to her, no longer playing to the crowd. Now it was just two people at a table, one holding a truth too heavy to release. "After Prevost was elected," Crockett said, "I started having a dream. The same one, every night." Her words were plain, unembellished, which made them sharper. "I'm standing in St. Peter's Square. It's empty. The sky is gray like dawn, but drained of life. I look up at the balcony." She paused, her eyes distant. "He's there." The host leaned in. "Prevost." Crockett nodded slowly. "Dressed in white, smiling. But he doesn't cast a shadow." A murmur rippled through the audience, that instinctive reaction to something. Uncanny. "The sun's behind him," she continued. "The light should hit the ground, but it doesn't. It passes through him, like he's not there." The host tried to ground it. "Dreams can be wild, you know. Maybe it's just stress. Congress isn't exactly a walk in the park." Crockett's gaze met his, not accusing, just certain. "It doesn't feel like a dream. It feels like a memory I haven't lived yet." She leaned forward, her voice gaining weight. "Every time it's the same. He raises his hand, like he's about to bless the square. The bells should ring, but they don't. No sound, no birds, no wind, just him, me, and the silence." The host's voice dropped. "That's intense." Crockett didn't blink. "I've had nightmares before, cases that stayed with me, votes that haunted me. But I've never woken up shaking. Not until this." The audience exhaled, a soft collective release. "I didn't want to talk about it," Crockett admitted. "Not to my staff, not to my pastor. The more I thought about it, the more I wondered if I was seeing something no one else could." The host tried to lighten it. "But it's just a dream, right?" Crockett's eyes searched his. "Then why does it feel like a warning?" The question hung unanswered. Then she added, "Dreams are supposed to be your mind sorting things out. But what does it mean when the dream has no shadow?" The host had no response, no joke, no segue. A studio light flickered, just once, but it was enough. Silence settled again before he found his voice. "Jasmine, are you saying this is more than just one letter?" She nodded, reaching into her blazer again. This time she pulled out a small stack of envelopes, each aged, some smudged with faint marks, ink, ash, or something else. None had stamps, none had return addresses. All had been delivered by hand, left where she'd find them. She spread them on the table like evidence in a trial. The host's curiosity turned to unease. "Where did these come from?" "Different places," Crockett said. "My office in D.C., my car in Dallas, once inside a Bible I keep on my desk." She picked up the top envelope and opened it, revealing a single sheet of paper, typed, "No, signature." She read aloud, "When the successor smiles, the faithful will wait in silence." She set it aside and opened another. "The chosen one speaks, but his voice carries no weight." Another. "Do not name him. Let him reveal himself." And one more, her voice steady but heavy. "He casts no shadow because the light does not know him." The host shook his head. "Are you saying someone's been sending you these since Prevost became Pope?" Crockett nodded. The first arrived 3 days after his election. She held up a thin, pale envelope, its edges creased. None of them use his name. Never Robert Prevost. Just phrases, hints, like they're afraid to say it outright. Host swallowed. "And you think it's deliberate?" Crockett's brow lifted slightly. "Have you ever tried to tell the truth about someone powerful without saying their name? It's not caution, it's fear." The audience sat transfixed, each word sinking in like testimony. The studio felt smaller, the lights dimmer, as if the room itself were listening. The host picked up one of the letters, handling it like evidence. He read aloud, voice low. "If he does not blink, the world must." He looked at Crockett. "What does that mean?" Her eyes darkened. "I think it means we're being watched, not just by him, but through him. These aren't threats. They're signals, quiet ones, like someone saying, 'Don't confront it, just watch. Let him show himself.'" The host leaned back. "Do you think someone's trying to stop you from speaking out?" For the first time, Crockett broke. Eye contact, staring into a space beyond the table, beyond the cross, beyond the studio. "I think someone's trying to make sure I do speak," she said. "But only when the time is right." The set felt colder. The cameras rolled, but the performance had vanished. The host, usually quick with a pivot, sat silent, his eyes on the stack of letters. Crockett picked up the first envelope, the one she'd opened after Francis's death. "There's more," she said, unfolding a second page with care, as if it might crumble. She didn't hand it over. She read it herself, her voice carrying the weight of a closing argument. "He may wear the robes, but not the soul. His eyes will see, but not understand. His words will promise peace, but leave only echoes." She paused, looking up. This isn't how Francis wrote. Not his encyclicals, not his speeches. This was personal, urgent. She continued reading. "There will be silence where there should be cries. If he does not hear them, he is not the shepherd. He is only his image." The host blinked, lips parting, then closing. Crockett let the paper rest on the table, its edges curling from age. "He was warning us," she said. "Warning me, that someone could stand in the Vatican, wear the title, speak the words, but carry nothing inside." The host's voice was barely above a whisper. "This is huge. Francis wasn't one for conspiracies." Crockett nodded. "Exactly. That's why this keeps me up at night." She lifted the page again, reading the final lines. "If I am gone before him, he must be watched. Not for what he says, but for what he leaves unsaid." The words settled, like dust after a collapse. The host searched her face. "Watched for what?" Crockett didn't flinch. "For what he doesn't do." The room went utterly still. No coughs, no shuffles. Even the hum of the lights seemed to fade. Crockett folded the letter and set it aside. "I think Francis knew he couldn't stop what was coming," she said. "But he hoped someone would see it, say it, even if it was too late." The host's voice was soft, almost afraid. "Why you? Why send this to a congresswoman?" Crockett exhaled, a faint, bitter smile crossing her lips. "I've asked myself that every day. I'm not a cardinal. I'm not a priest. I'm a lawyer, a representative from Texas." She gestured toward the cross. "But maybe that's why. Maybe he thought I'd see it as a case, evidence, not just symbols. Or maybe I was just the only one he thought would listen. The host stared. Do you believe it? Crockett met his gaze, unflinching. I do. Not because I want to, but because every day since Prevost's election, I've felt it. She touched her chest just once. Something's not right. Something's pretending to be. The silence that followed was thick, the kind that comes when truth brushes against something larger. The stage lights dimmed slightly. Maybe a glitch, maybe not. The studio no longer felt like a talk show set. It felt like a chamber where secrets had been waiting to breathe. Crockett spoke again, her voice quieter now. There was a meeting, one that never made the news. The host's head snapped up. With Francis? She nodded. It was off the record, not even logged with my staff. A contact in Rome arranged it, someone I'd met during a human rights conference. It was brief, maybe 20 minutes, but it was enough. The host leaned forward. What happened? Crockett took a breath. It was in a small room. No pomp, no ceremony. Francis was in a plain shirt, no vestments. He looked tired but sharp. He didn't talk policy or politics. He said, watch the spaces between the words. One day they'll speak louder than any voice. The host frowned. That's cryptic. Crockett nodded. I didn't get it then. It felt like wisdom from someone who knew his time was short. But then, at the end, he looked past me, like he saw something in the room. She paused, and there he was. The host didn't move. Prevost? Crockett's nod was slow. Standing in the doorway, unannounced, just there. Watching. Not blinking, just watching. The audience was silent, the air heavy. The host's voice dropped. Was he listening? Crockett shook her head. It didn't feel like listening. It felt like he was studying. Not me, not Francis, but the moment itself. She reached into her blazer and pulled out a folded sheet of heavy paper, matte, like something printed for preservation. She unfolded it carefully. This is all I have left of that meeting. The host leaned closer as she laid it flat. It was a photograph, a still from a security camera, grainy but clear enough. Francis sat at a table, his face weary but focused. Crockett was across from him mid-sentence. And in the background, barely in frame, stood a figure in white. The host's jaw tightened. That's him. Crockett pointed to the figure. He's looking right at the camera, not at us, not at the room, at the lens, like he knew someone would see this later. The host sat back, voice low. This is chilling. Crockett didn't waver. The footage was erased. Every copy, every server. I checked, but not before I got this. She tapped the photo. When I saw it, it felt like he wasn't in that room. It felt like he was already somewhere else, watching through time. The host looked at the image again. Why erase it? Crockett's eyes met his. Because it didn't fit the narrative. The silence that followed was heavy, final. The photograph sat between them, a fragment of a moment buried by design. Behind it, behind every word Crockett had spoken, loomed a truth. Not every leader is chosen for light, and not every silence is sacred. Crockett sat still, her hand resting on the photo. The host hadn't spoken in nearly a minute, and the audience didn't stir. Then she said, "There's one more thing." She reached into her blazer pocket, pulling out a small, yellowed slip of paper, folded tightly. "This was left on my dressing room table tonight right before the show." The host's eyes widened. "What?" Crockett nodded. "No envelope, just this, next to my notes." She unfolded it and read aloud. "If you speak, the silence will answer." She paused. "That's it. No name, no threat. Just a choice." The host didn't interrupt. Crockett laid the note on the table and reached into her blazer once more, pulling out a final page from Francis's letter. "This is the part I wasn't sure I'd share," she said, looking at the audience. Then, the camera. "It's not a warning. It's a call." She unfolded the paper and read, her voice clear, resolute. When the voice of justice becomes only a sound, the truth will fade in silence. There are those who will wear the mantle, but not the duty. You will know them by what they leave undone. She lowered the page. Francis believed silence could heal but also hide. He believed someone was coming who would lead through absence, not peace. She reached for one last item, a small, faded photograph, its colors muted by time. She held it up but didn't show it yet. This was taken years ago before I ever met Francis. Crockett held the photograph, its edges worn, the gloss dulled by years of quiet preservation. The studio lights seemed to dim further, as if the room itself were leaning in to listen. The audience remained silent, their earlier cheers a distant memory. The host, usually quick to fill the air, sat frozen, his eyes locked on the image Crockett hadn't yet revealed. "This was taken almost 10 years ago," she said, her voice steady, but laced with something deeper. Memory, perhaps, or conviction. I was still practicing law in Dallas before politics pulled me in. It was a community event, nothing special, just a fundraiser for a local shelter. She paused, turning the photograph over in her hands, her fingers tracing its border. "I didn't even know he was there until I saw this later." The host found his voice barely above a whisper. "Who?" Crockett's eyes flicked to the camera, then back to the host. "Francis." She turned the photograph toward the audience, holding it up for the cameras to catch. It was a candid shot, a younger Jasmine Crockett, mid-laugh, standing among a crowd of volunteers. In the background, slightly out of focus but unmistakable, was Pope Francis, then Cardinal Jorge Bergoglio, dressed in simple clerical black, his face calm but watchful. He wasn't looking at the crowd. He was looking at her. The audience stirred, a low murmur breaking the silence. The host leaned forward, squinting at the image. "That's him? In Dallas?" Crockett nodded. "He was visiting quietly. No press, no entourage. I didn't meet him that day. I didn't even know he'd been there until someone sent me this photo, months later. No note, no explanation." She set the photograph on the table, next to the stack of envelopes and the chipped cross. "I thought it was a coincidence. Now I'm not so sure." The host's voice was cautious, as if he was stepping into uncharted territory. "You think he was, what, watching you? Even back then?" Crockett's lips pressed into a thin line. "I think he saw something. Maybe not in me, but in what was coming. He was always talking about discernment, about seeing the signs before they're clear." She tapped the photograph lightly. "This was the first sign. I just didn't know. It." The studio felt smaller now, the walls closer, the air heavier. The cameras rolled, but the show had long since left the script behind. Crockett's hands rested on the table, the photograph and letters spread before her like exhibits in a trial she'd been preparing for years. She looked at the host, then at the audience, her gaze steady but searching. "I've spent my life fighting for truth," she said. "In courtrooms, in Congress, in places where silence is a weapon. But this..." She gestured to the letters, the cross, the photograph. "This is different. This isn't about policy or votes. This is about something bigger. Something I wasn't ready to face until tonight." The host swallowed, his usual polish gone. "Jasmine, are you saying you believe Francis chose you to... what? Expose something about Prevost?" Crockett didn't answer right away. She looked down at the final page of Francis's letter, the one she'd read moments before. Her fingers brushed the paper, as if grounding herself in its weight. "I don't think he chose me to expose anything," she said finally. "I think he chose me to see, to notice what others might miss." She paused, her voice softening. "And to decide what to do with it." The host leaned back, processing. But what is it? You've got letters, a dream, a photo. None of it says Prevost is, what, dangerous? Evil? Crockett's eyes darkened, not with anger, but with clarity. It's not about what he is. It's about what he isn't. Francis warned of a shepherd who doesn't hear the cries, who speaks but doesn't carry the weight. I've seen that before, not in a church, but in a courtroom, in a boardroom, in the halls of Congress. People who wear the title, but not the responsibility. She leaned forward, her voice low but fierce. If that's what's standing in the Vatican now, then the silence isn't just a warning. It's a call to act. The audience was silent, absorbing her words like a congregation hearing a sermon. The host, for once, didn't try to steer the conversation. He looked at the letters, the photograph, the cross, then back at Crockett. "What are you going to do?" he asked, his voice raw. Crockett exhaled, a slow, deliberate breath. "I don't know yet," she admitted, "but I know I can't stay quiet anymore." She picked up the small slip of paper left in her dressing room, the one that read, "If you speak, the silence will answer." Whoever left this wanted me to know there's no going back. And maybe there isn't. Maybe that's the point. She folded the note and slipped it into her blazer pocket, her movements deliberate, final. Then she looked directly at the camera, her eyes piercing through the lens, through the screen, to whoever was watching, now or later. Francis said to watch the spaces between the words. "I'm watching, and I'm listening." The studio remained still, the weight of her words settling over the room like a fog. The chipped cross sat in the center of the table, its broken form a silent witness. The letters, the photograph, the note. They were all there, fragments of a truth too vast to name. And behind them, behind Crockett's steady gaze, loomed a question. What happens when the silence finally speaks? The host tried to find his footing, his voice unsteady. "Jasmine, I don't know what to say. This is a lot." Crockett's lips curved into a faint, bittersweet smile. Truth usually is. The lights above flickered again, just for a moment, and the room seemed to hold its breath. The cameras didn't cut away, the audience didn't clap. There was no music, no cue to fade to commercial. Just Crockett, the table, and the weight of what she'd laid bare. She leaned back, in her chair, her hands folded, her expression calm but resolute. "I don't know what comes next," she said, almost to herself. "But I know I'm not alone in this. Someone out there is watching too, and they're waiting." The host nodded slowly, as if afraid to break the moment. "Jasmine Crockett, thank you for sharing this." She nodded once, a lawyer acknowledging the end of a testimony. The studio stayed quiet, the air thick with unspoken questions. The cameras lingered on her face, on the cross, on the letters, as if searching for something more. But Crockett said nothing else. She'd spoken her piece. The rest was up to the silence, and somewhere, in the spaces between the words, the truth was waiting to be heard.